Hi, I'm Lori.
And I'm Kevin, and this is No Longer Ashamed.
We are survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
And we're here to share with you that if you're a survivor, you don't have to be alone.
Our logo is a salamander, and the reason is a fire salamander can survive a fire, and you have survived a fire.
We want to help you with your journey to healing and hope.
We are all survivors together, and we walk this journey together, and you are not alone.
By telling our stories, we are hoping that you will have the courage to share your stories as well and find your voice.
Because stories are so important, and for so long I know that I wouldn't tell my story, but when I finally shared my story, that's when I got my freedom.
And this is our journey and your journey to healing and hope. So come with us. Today we have our guest, Daniel, and we interviewed him just over 2 years ago in episode 56. And we thought we'd catch up with Daniel and see how things are going with him since we did our interview. So,
welcome.
Thank you. Daniel. It's good to see you again.
It's good to be here. Good to see you all.
How have you been doing?
I've been doing good for the most part, all things considered. I finally hit the 50 mark last year, getting ready to hit 51 this month. So
congratulations. You're now closer to being 100 than being born.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
A friend of mine told me when I turned 50. Actually, it was my brother. I think he was trying to mess with me.
Well, yeah, it actually adds new impetus to the things I tell my boys when I'm trying to teach them something. I've lived twice as long as you know. When you hit 50, I mean, it's always been true, but I mean, when you hit 50, it really gives that impetus behind what you're saying. So
Now, when we talked to you were going through training for counseling.
Going through mental health coaching classes.
Yes.
And right. I actually am still doing that. I'm doing another segment particular to youth mental health coaching, but it's actually not to be a coach. It's to be a supportive person for people that are going through those types of crises. So it's more of a supportive role. You get a lot of the same training where they're dealing with trauma and addictions and things like that. You get a lot of the same training, but it's not quite as rigorous as it would be to actually obtain like licensure or anything like that. So, But yeah, it definitely pleases me to be on the lookout for things and to be a supportive individual in my church or community to kind of steer them to professionals for help, and you can kind of help them out to know what to look for as well. So yeah, and actually it's informed. I have 2 more segments to go through, and there's several classes in each segment before I get my actual certificate, but I've kind of taken that slowly just because I'm a busy dad, so I'm still doing that. But the thing about that has really been beneficial for me is it's actually helped me understand a lot of my own journey to wholeness, because I find myself in a lot of the classes that I take, that a lot of the experiences that the instructors relate, things to look out for, like having gone through trauma and having been the victim of abuse and things like that. It really does give you a little more insight, I think, when you're taking classes as well, because you find yourself all throughout the training. Yeah. So it's proven beneficial to me in personal ways as well.
Yeah, I found when I did the coaching classes, learning a lot about myself as well, and also doing the podcast. And you were a big help in our own journey as far as when you talked about ownership in language and talking about my abuser versus the person who abused me, and how saying it my abuser, you're claiming ownership, and how that affects you mentally rather than saying the person that did this to me. And that was a big, really big shift in the way we talked about it as well, and realizing that how important our own language that we speak and that we think, how that affects us. So
that is so true. And I still find it's hard to untrain yourself of language that you've used for decades, right? I still find myself, the other day I was discussing it with somebody and I still wanted to insert the possessive tense in there, the possessive pronouns in there, my, and it's like, no, Daniel, no, divorce yourself from ownership here and correct it. So I try to always go back and correct it when I'm talking that way, but you default to that, right? You default subconsciously, you default to that language. So yeah, but it is freeing when you realize this wasn't my burden to bear and I'm not going to bear it any longer.
Well, and that changes the story too. In our brain and for our listener, when we change our language and suddenly when we're telling a story in a different way and not using those, I like how you said possessive, it not only frees us, but also saying it out loud differently makes that difference. I'm really curious with all this training that you're doing, what kind of epiphanies have you had, maybe similar to that for yourself or for when you're looking at helping others? Has there been anything that's been surprising to you?
Well, just this morning, I was going through a class this morning, and it just struck me because the instructor was she was a trauma specialist. And so she was talking about things that we just kind of commonly know when we've gone through recovery work or we've gone through understanding our own stories or whatever. But sometimes they're presented in a way that just somehow click, and you're like, I never quite saw it that way before. She was specifically talking about how the brain, how during trauma, a lot of times there's dissociation, okay, because it's overwhelming and the brain can't really process it, so you dissociate. But then these things come back later, and specifically for males who are victims of sexual abuse when they're young, they really compartmentalize those things until they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, I think is what the literature shows. And then those things come back, and they come back usually with a real vengeance and a force. And really what it is the brain actually saying, okay, I think you're actually in a safer place now, in a more mature place now where you need to start processing it. So we experience these as flashbacks or triggers of some sort, and they're alarming to us because we feel like we can't own them or we have no control over them. But really it's actually the brain's way of saying, I actually think you're in a better spot now and you can actually start tackling this. But the temptation in that moment, or our reflex, is to have the same type of response maybe we had during the trauma, which is to dissociate or to panic, or, you feel like you're actually losing control when those things resurface, but you're not actually. The brain is trying to help you because you do have control. And you may still need to take it slower as far as dealing with it. And usually when things like that come back to me now, I do it in, like, I want to say, segments where I'll take a little bit of it at a time, one day at a time, and I'll process a little bit more of it. But I always used to kind of fear those things because they felt so overwhelming to me. But it was empowering to me just to have somebody say, that's actually your brain saying, you are strong enough now. And I was like, oh, my brain is my friend. It's not betraying me, right? So it's actually telling me, Daniel, you are in a good spot, and I'm going to start opening this back up to you. Yeah, that was I found that so enlightening and empowering to me this morning. It was powerful.
Wow. Did that resonate with you, Kevin?
Oh, yeah. I actually started talking about being a survivor kind of by accident. It wasn't, I know you had the epiphany of having the depression, and then you prayed about it, and God answered you and said you were an abuse victim. And for me, it came out because my friend's sister talked about being a survivor. But I think I was in a spot where I could acknowledge it and start dealing with it. And at the time, my night terrors got really bad. And I think that was part of the process was these night terrors came back and with a vengeance, like you said, and I was able to learn how to deal with them better. I was able to, when I'd have a night terror and I'd wake up, I'd process them better. I was able to look at myself, realize I'm an adult, I'm grown up, I can take care of myself. Because, when you're in the night terror, I was the age that I was abused. I was a child. Mm-hmm. And so I'd wake up and I'd have to kind of process, okay, I'm an adult, I'm safe, this is not really happening. That happened to me, but this isn't happening now, and I'm grown up and I can take care of myself. And so I had the mental capacity to process it in a healthier way, even though they were still happening. But they did go away, and I haven't had them ever since I got to a place where I was able to forgive the perpetrator and have freedom from that, and immediately they went away. So I think, a lot of what I really recognize that. And it's funny, so many times when we do our interviews and we do our panels and so forth, having other people's perspectives really helps having insight to our own process, because a lot of times I'm not aware of how I'm processing things. And then all of a sudden
Absolutely.
someone else talks about how they're doing it. And I go, oh, yeah, that's happening
Mm-hmm.
to me too. And I think that was why it was so valuable too when I was going to the men's group and, with a group of survivors, and we were all discussing it together, our
Mm-hmm.
different processes, and we were all very different men. I mean, we were different ages, different backgrounds, different lifestyles, and yet so much of it resonated.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's why we really appreciated you bringing the insight with our language, because people will want to say, like, maybe they prayed about it and they got relief, but somebody else did and it didn't work with them. So they'll say, well, you need to, or, when you do this, this will happen. And so we're always such big advocates on how we talk, because we could think we're helping someone and we're actually
Oh,
making
yeah.
them feel like, well, God loves me more than you, because he did help
Oh,
and help you. And that's been
100%.
that's been a huge thing for me. And sometimes when I do interviews on my other podcast, I like stop people and then I feel like a word Nazi or something. But the thing that you said was so interesting, because just this morning I was listening to a podcast. It was about something else, but it was about triggers.
Hmm.
And sometimes maybe I give too much credit to a trigger. Like you said, maybe when a trigger comes up, instead of, oh, I got triggered, it's like, maybe there's more to this, and just sitting with it, like being okay with it. I mean, if we're in the middle of something with people, it may not be easy, but I'm such a big advocate for taking a few minutes and just being alone and getting centered and looking at your thoughts. And I love how you said, maybe it's your mind being your friend going, hey, guess what? You're tough. You can do this.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that was mentioned this morning in the session I was listening to was she said it. And like I said, these are some things that I think we just know just by going through our narratives and our stories. But when somebody else says it, it just gives you pause. And she's like, the antidote to trauma is social support. And she was saying it in the terms of specifically youth going through trauma and adverse childhood experiences and whatever. If they have a strong social support network, it makes a huge difference in whether they'll disclose or whether they'll feel comfortable enough at some point. It may not be right away, but at some point to actually go to somebody for help. And I do think that was integral to my own ability to approach things the way I have. Again, I didn't do that till I was an adult, but I did have enough social support in my life when I was younger that it made me more comfortable in being vulnerable. And still to this day, I'm a very vulnerable individual. And that has helped me immensely in my journey to wholeness and healing from what happened. Not everybody's like that, and everybody has different personalities, but having a strong social support network is important. And Kevin, you mentioned that just a moment ago when you were talking about how the men's group helped you so much. Isolation breeds traumatic response, and the antidote to trauma is social support. And I appreciated that when I was listening to it today, because I was like, yeah, that's so right. So true.
Yeah, we
that
can't heal in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, and
Right.
that reminds me of we've talked recently about that basketball coach that was abusing young men. Oh, I forget the name of the city.
Sumner, Washington.
Sumner, yes. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
one of the teenage boys that was still in school went on, network TV to talk about it. And one of the things he talked about was how much support he had from his parents and just the community, which enabled him to actually testify in court, bring the case, testify in court, and also talk about it on live TV.
Oh,
For a
yeah.
teenage boy to
At
talk
his
about,
age.
being abused by his coach, this coach was a very popular figure in that town. And for him to be able to do that, he credited his support. And it is so critical. And I think that's something that can change and can actually make a difference about abuse, is having support for survivors, being able to be there, support them, give them the courage to talk about it, give them the courage to do something about it. I think that's what would make the difference.
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for bringing that example up, because that boy warmed my heart when I saw his bravery. Certainly at his age, I didn't have anybody in my life suspecting anything was happening to me. Signs were there. I did have support, like I said, but I didn't have anybody actually with an eye to kind of discover what was going on. I don't know that I was spared mercifully from having to testify against the last abuser in court, the one that actually was tried and sent to prison. I was spared mercifully. They took all my statements by, well, cassette recording back then. They didn't even video record anything I said, and I was spared. I often wonder how I would have done at trial. I was still blaming myself. And here, the example you're giving, that coach out there, that boy, and he was disclaiming the abuse. Like somehow already people were helping him process that, you know what, you don't have anything to feel ashamed about because this is not your fault. And that gave him, I just admire his courage. I don't know that I would have had it at his age. I don't think I could have sat in a courtroom. I don't think I could have confronted the abuser at the time. I still blame myself.
That's a good point. And think about it. If 26 years is how long it takes for people to really say what happened, you've lived with that for all those years.
I know.
Blaming yourself because there's nobody saying it was their fault, they were inappropriate. And you see yourself as an adult. It's hard to put yourself in the position that, but I was a child.
No,
like,
right.
We don't do that for ourselves. And that's what I love when people, and I think, the more we talk about it, they're getting braver and seeing that young man stand up. And I was working at a radio station at the time and listening to a news radio station, listening to him and thinking, man, how brave, because I think of how hard it's been for us after all these years to share our story and how brave that he could be like, you know what, I don't think this is right. And then, of course, people coming out of the woodwork. So he actually probably saved so many.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's so true. Absolutely. And stories like this now get more coverage, it seems, and we're just living in a different time. I grew up in the 80s and I was born in 74. So by the time we were in the 80s, I was already being abused. So we grew up in the 80s, and that was really transitional period in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of our parents at the time were still old school in the way they thought about things. Things were hush hush. If something bad happened, you didn't publicize it. And now there's enough daylight, I think, being shined on some of these issues that it does make a difference for young people today. Still got a long ways to go. There's still a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation out there about it, but it is a different type of day. And so we see, this example where the boy had social support, had a media that was, how do I want to say it, supportive as well, and gave him the courage and strength to do what he did and come out strong. He'll still have things to go through, but is he so much better positioned to go through it than I would have ever been.
Yeah. And just the fact that coach was convicted, hopefully that'll wake some people up and they'll just stop. They'll go, I don't want to go to prison, so I'm going to stop, rather than going more underground. But we need to see more of this. We want to see people paying the price for what they're doing to vulnerable children.
What's interesting to me is, I'm at a period of my life now where if I see a group of boys, I blogged about this, it's probably been a year or two, maybe 2 years ago. I can't remember exactly when, but I wrote a blog piece about this where we were parked in town. We were parked at a store or a restaurant. I don't remember, but I saw a group of teenage boys just walking together. And that always warms my heart because I remember when I was a teenager and I had my best friends and we painted the town red. And, but my thoughts always go to, is one of them suffering because they've been abused? The statistics are dire, and it always saddens my heart because I always think when I see teenage boys, which one of them is like me? Which one of them is suffering in silence and don't know what to make of what's happening? Because the reality is, and it's an uncomfortable truth, that we have those statistics, they're real.
Yeah. And like Kevin has said before, where's the outrage? And I think the more that we talk about it, the more people are going to go, the non-believers are going to go, oh, it really does happen. Because I think there is, a lot of people that just don't want to believe it happens. So they choose to believe that it can't. And that's so dangerous for children.
Well, isn't it uncomfortable, though? I mean, if our children aren't safe, what does that say about anything in society? And yeah, you're 100% right. And there is denialism still there. And it is sad, and because denial is probably the chief contributor to the perpetuation of abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin, you look like you were going to say something.
Well, and abuse has taken new turns now with the advent of how much
Mm-hmm.
social media there is. And it used to be we were all scared, stranger danger, even though the majority of abuse happened with someone by someone that was related or you knew. But now it's online and it's become even more concealed in its methods because of the advent of social media and how
Mm-hmm.
kids aren't out doing stuff so much. They don't go out and hang out in the mall as much. They don't go out and, ride their bikes
Right.
all over, but they're on their computers or their video games and but it's infected that. And most parents aren't aware of how much of a presence that is in their media, in their social media, their video games. The predators are there and people aren't aware of that. So this
Mm-hmm.
awareness needs to grow with the way the predators are changing their methods as well.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
yeah, AI too. It's like we worry about the older people because they're getting these FaceTimes from their grandson in another country. To your bank account
Mm-hmm.
and save me. And it's like with AI, if they can't look either direction, they're AI. But also kids, they may know AI, but AI is becoming so sophisticated that a lot of the crime profile podcasts I listen to, they're very concerned. And the latest one where they turn everyone into babies? Have you seen those?
Yeah.
So it's like two babies doing a podcast. Have
Oh
you
yeah,
not?
yeah, yes.
So the reason they're concerned with that is that now these pedophiles can do that. And some people go, well, let them, it's online, but no, then it creates the desire and they want to go out and do it for real.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
they're all so concerned about this. And AI is here to stay. So how do we, this is just I don't have an answer, but it's stirring in my mind. The more aware people are, the more people in certain industries, if they know, they're going to be like, oh, I'm in this industry, maybe I can help educate or put filters but the more people begin to believe that this happens, like you said. And when we look at statistics, we know men don't report. So we
Mm-hmm.
know that it's bigger than.
Right. Oh, 100%.
Mhm.
And the thing about, AI as well, that's a concern to me is, men don't report. And, even women who do, or girls who do, a lot of them they don't go public with a story. It takes a certain kind of healing to actually go public, and personality, I think, too. But AI can be used you see this in the political world. It's a real issue. They can make up anything about you and put your face on it, or use a voice recording of something you've said publicly, and then create a voice text it's not even you. And the thing that concerns me about that, as a survivor is, if people are out there trying to discredit survivor stories, and they are, how is AI going to lend itself to that public shaming of survivors who come forward? It's a real concern for our age.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
feels like we're just starting to get to this point of recognizing the issue and realizing the scope and, how many people are affected and how it's happening. And it's not just a stranger danger, but it's also relatives, it's also
Hmm.
friends, people we know. And we're kind of catching up, and now technology is making it more advanced and more dangerous. I mean, there's so many kids that are getting coerced into doing things
Oh yeah.
online, and then they're getting blackmailed. And there have been a lot of reports of suicides of
Suicide.
young
Yeah.
men who got coerced into sexting, and then they were told, if you don't pay this money, we're gonna smear your name by showing these pictures to everyone. And it's just, as soon as it feels like we're starting to get recognition, all of a sudden they're finding other ways of bypassing that recognition.
Well, and
So
isn't that the nature of a predator?
Yes.
yeah.
100%. I was thinking of the exact same thing. Evil has a way of quickly adapting. And once you turn over the rock and you see the tail, the body is already somewhere else, deeply rooted underground, coming up somewhere else. I mean, it's hard to completely encapsulate and trap that monster. It takes a lot of vigilance. And so, as survivors and as advocates, we can feel overwhelmed by some of that, but we can't lose heart, because the work we
Mhm.
do is so important for the ones that we can somehow be an encouragement to. But yeah, it's a real concern. The whole sextortion thing is awful for teenagers right now, and for adults too, but especially for teens they don't have developed coping mechanisms, for that type of trauma. And yeah.
It seems to me the more people that will tell their story, even though they may not want to, because of shame or whatever, but the more of us who share our story to say it's real, then the more people are going to be aware. And maybe you haven't told your story and you work in the tech industry and you maybe don't tell it, but you use it to help others. Mm-hmm. And, I think there's a podcast I sent to Kevin, in Washington State, they passed a law that clergy has to report. Guess what? They're overturning it. They're overturning it. And how terrifying is that when people who should be reporting child abuse, who should care, have to choose, if I do it, I'm going against my church and my vow, and I could lose my job, but the child could be hurt or die or whatever. And it's like, we're seeing people be put in these predicaments, but if we have been through this and we can turn around and use what we know and our field to have an impact, how crazy would that be?
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I mean, the whole issue of mandatory reporting is supposed to be to protect children. And so, there are some there are some faiths where, like confession is a sacrosanct thing. It's completely private, and to bring it out in the open is somehow a violation of a religious principle there. But people do go through these loyalties, right? Am I loyal to my faith, or am I loyal to what the government's telling me to do? Am I loyal to the child? What am I supposed to do here? It astounds me, though, that they're overturning the law now that, they passed it, and now they're going to get it overturned. That does astound me, because generally that type of thing it's a progressive thing, right, to pass that type of a law. And usually if you can get it passed, it's because most people support it. So it kind of flummoxes me that they're taking a step backward there.
Well, and the guy that it's called the Preacher Boys that reported it on his podcast, he said when that law passed, it gave him hope, because he's reporting all these basically terrible things that is happening mostly in churches. And he said, and I had finally, in this job that's been so hard, I had some hope when they passed that law. And then he said, and now they're going to overturn it. And doing this work is not easy. And, there's times Kevin and I'll do an interview and we won't talk till the next week or whatever, but we were both kind of traumatized, even though it's important to share the story, but it does affect us. And I'm not even saying like a trigger. It's just that there is a sadness that people have walked through this. And when I think of children that walk through this alone, it just makes me want to cry. Mm-hmm. We were all children that walked through it alone, and we managed, and we found some healing and hope and, hopefully good lives, I feel like. But the more we can get out there and help, the more people won't have to walk alone and be isolated.
And don't you think some of this is coming from this denialism still in society? So, if you look at just the statistics, and those are only based upon reporting, and you're like, this many children, really? This many children, like, really? And then, a law is introduced to kind of force people to take it seriously. And then people are still like, well, it can't be that bad. I mean, but the thing is, they are only looking at maybe children, and children are resilient in a lot of ways. They dissociate, and they compartmentalize, and they find a way, because the human psyche is to live, and humans find a way to live. But what they don't see is the decades after that, as an adult, when their world comes crashing down, and now they need mental health services, or some of their trauma rubs off onto their children, or they're not looking at this thing holistically at all. They're looking at, it can't be that bad, and I don't really hear much about it when, affecting people or whatever. Like I said, my mom's generation was sweep it under the rug. You protect the person maybe from the perpetrator if you find out, but you don't deal with it. You don't go to counseling. You don't talk about it ever again, and you sweep it under the rug, and you just get through life. That's how people coped with it for generations. Was it the best thing? No. Are we damaged in some way? Do we take that damage into our adult lives? Yes, we do. And now we see that. Now mental health professionals understand that, and they're trying to stem the tide that they're dealing with, but it's not particularly a well thought of way to look at things when you're denying everything. These things will haunt these children for the rest of their lives. I mean, it is Like I said, some of those who abused me are dead, but I'm still living with what they did to me.
Yeah.
And until I die, I will be. So they don't have to deal with it. I still do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's not only denialism, though. I think we're still trying to get the statute of limitation laws changed. And one of the hardest things to overcome is states are afraid of the cost to them, because they know there will be lawsuits, as you know, as it's happened, and they'll have to pay for those lawsuits that will come up. And so because of the cost, states are fighting against overturning the statute of limitations. And it's not just the denialism. No, they know the scope of how big it is, and that's what they're afraid of,
It's the
is having,
politics.
yeah,
Yeah.
having to address what happened because they can't afford it.
Yeah. So they're putting a price.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Isn't that awful? I mean, doesn't that tell you that the magnitude is much worse than the statistics are saying?
Hmm.
If prosecutors or, court systems are worried at the influx of cases they'll get, if the statute of limitations is changed, then that tells you something.
That
But I
tells
think
you.
on the average, like, the average voter may not realize the extent of how these things really affect people, and they're the ones living in denial. But I agree, like, it's awful. They
Yeah.
want to prosecute people for petty crimes. Wouldn't you want to land? I mean, if you were a prosecutor, wouldn't you want to land your career with groundbreaking cases on sexual abuse? I mean,
Yeah.
wouldn't you want to build your reputation on being a person that advocates for true victims instead of prosecuting somebody for not paying their taxes, or, I mean,
Hmm. Something that seems so petty in comparison, but
in comparison, yeah.
we've put a price on. Basically, we're protecting the perps because it's too expensive to deal with it.
Yeah. And we've discovered, I mean, people in different populations, prison, for example, so many have been sexually abused. With drug abuse, I work with so many people in recovery, almost all of them. I mean, I would say more than 80% have a story of childhood trauma. And so when we look at that and we complain about is prison, is homelessness, is that really a housing problem or is it a child abuse problem?
Oh, yeah.
And if we could frame it that way, maybe things could start to flip. And it feels overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Well, often when, homelessness is in the news a lot lately, especially where we live, there's a large population and a large issue with it. And they often talk about the mental health issues, but they're not talking about these people are coming from trauma. This population has been affected by trauma, and that's often the cause of them being homeless, because the trauma has affected them in such a way that they're dependent on drugs, they're dependent, and kids run away from home because of trauma, all these issues, but they're calling it mental health issues. They don't name trauma. And I think when we start changing the awareness, we start bringing up the true issues of trauma, then maybe we'll start to really address it.
I appreciate that. And I think you're right. I think, people have a tendency when they look at somebody having a mental health issue, they don't always in their minds trace that or think that that can be traced back. They think it's just a deficiency of that person's mind but I don't know. Did I tell you all? I can't remember if at the time that my wife and I are foster parents now. Yeah, we're foster parents. So we've been doing it for about 2.5 years, and we've had several children in our home. So we're actually getting ready to adopt our first baby. Actually, he came to us at 3 days old. He's a little over a year now. So we're getting ready to adopt him. But being a foster parent, learning case history on your children, what happened with their birth families, and then the challenges that the parents are facing, very, very often, those parents have gone through some type of severe trauma and they're not able to cope with that. And so this comes out in the way they raise their children, or it directly links to the reason why their children are removed from their home because they can't care for them. So they're experiencing psychotic breaks or they're experiencing some type of neglect for their own children. It's because it's generational trauma. So they themselves as children were traumatized severely. They had adverse childhood experiences, and now they have children and they can't raise their children. That's right. It layers right on top of each other and it builds And it gives you a lot of compassion because a lot of people judge, in the foster care system, it's easy to judge birth parents when you get children from horrific circumstances. But when you learn those biological parents' stories, sometimes it all makes sense to you. It's tragic. And sometimes the best course of action is for children to be removed until the parent can get help and, overcome some things. And then sometimes there's no overcoming. It's best for the child to go on. So we are adopting our little boy. He's a little over a year now. And we got him at 3 days old. He came to us from the hospital. So hopefully by late fall, the end of this year, we hope to actually have everything finalized.
Congratulations. My daughter adopted 3 out of the foster care system.
Oh, did she? Okay, well, good for her.
Yeah, and it's not easy, and when you foster a child that has to go back, that's really hard. And sometimes you see that the parent has made improvements and you want to support them. Sometimes you see the system's broke and they're giving them back to bad people. So it's, but to step in, that's so courageous and it's not easy. And, people are like, oh, isn't that sweet? And sometimes you want to go like, can we reframe that? But one of theirs they got as a tiny baby. The other 2, they got older. But, it's a journey because you don't know their history and they may react to something that you have no clue because you don't know their history. And you're like, the whole ACEs thing, it's like, wow, they're overreacting. I don't know what's happening. But the fact that you're going through this training is so beautiful because in a way, it's like peer to peer. It's like been there, done that. I understand. And being a container that can handle their stories when they're able to tell them, that's just amazing.
Yeah, right. And I like what you said about, when people say things like, is that people mean well, don't they? They mean well, even like you mentioned something earlier too about, and I can't remember exactly what you said, but you made some type of comment about, we were talking about language earlier. People mean well. They're not always, I'm talking about people outside of us that talk to us about either our own trauma or they talk to us about foster care or children that you're caring for. And they make comments that are well-intentioned, but they're not trauma-informed comments.
I love that. Well-intentioned, but
not trauma-informed.
I've always wanted to write a book for the well-meaning people.
Yeah. I think
if
people were more aware, especially in the foster care of children in this country, they would really recognize how much is broken and how difficult it is for the children, for the foster parents. I'm so happy you're adopting. That's so exciting, Daniel. I actually was a guest on A Fostered Life. It's a podcast that my friend did that it was for foster parents to help them to understand, the issues of being a foster parent and how difficult it is and what to be prepared for. And she had me on as a guest to talk about, being a survivor and what to expect or what you can expect from, children who are survivors of trauma and the issues they might face and how to be a little more prepared. And I think that's another thing we don't pay attention to is how hard it is to be a foster parent and also how broken the system is because so much of our society treats the symptoms. We treat people with drug addiction issues by trying to get them through rehab, but we don't address the reasons they're
100,
dependent on drugs. We treat kids who are in bad situations by just taking them out of the situation, but not addressing where that situation came from. I think if we just could get more awareness, people could recognize what the root causes of so many of these issues, we wouldn't be so focused on blaming these parents for being bad. We'd instead try to address the issues that cause them to be drug dependent or alcohol dependent or just abusive, the situations they came up in. Things could change a lot more.
To unbreak a system, it costs money.
Right. Well, and isn't this so? Like our whole society is built upon treating symptoms, even the medical industry. It is
Mm-hmm.
100% symptom related. I mean, treatment approach is, they treat symptoms. They don't, if you are having major health issues, they might send you to the dietitian if it's diabetes or something, but it's very little, it's not focused on that. Most cardiologists don't know how to tell you how to eat. They don't learn that in medical school. They don't teach them that in medical school. They teach them how to do surgery. And so it's true just about every support system of society is symptom based. I mean, they're symptom focused, I should say. But I agree with you. I mean, I think if the parent hit the child and that's why the child was removed, well, then you send the parent to anger management classes. Well, anger management classes, why is she angry? What happened in her life that she can't cope with her anger and she took it out on the child? So see, I mean, I think there is some recognition, especially at least in the foster care system, when you go through classes, they talk about all this stuff. So they're aware, but there has to be money to fund it. And there's not money to fund psychiatric care or even mental health care for most people that need it. And that not in this country, there's not. And so you do have a perpetually broken system. So you have children constantly victimized. And the thing about our little boy is I'm telling you, people looked at me and my wife and said, shouldn't you be grandparents at this stage in your life? It's like, well, my oldest son, just got married. He just got married. Okay. So I may have a grandchild on the way in the next year or two, but he just got married, my oldest. And my youngest is going to be 16. So people are looking at us like, you're taking a baby in. It's one thing to foster, but now you're actually adopting and this is going to be permanent. Shouldn't you be grandparents? Like, well, maybe, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is he has brought such joy into our home. And sometimes I look at him and I'm like, and really we couldn't have asked for a more perfect baby than him. But I look at him sometimes and I'm like, what could your life have been if it's tragic that he's even away from his birth mother? It's tragic that he's in the system. But what could his life been if he hadn't been rescued from a very horrible situation? And he'll have challenges to grow up with. Every adopted child does. And they're tough and they're difficult. But in some way, I get to somehow be a help to him in ways that nobody was even a help to me because I'm more aware of things. Like even with my own boys as they were growing, talking to them about their bodies, which a lot of parents don't do a lot of dads don't do. They're not comfortable talking to their sons about sexual matters or talking about puberty and the things that they're going through, and having those discussions were important to me for my own children because I learned the worst way you could ever learn about those types of things. I learned by somebody perpetrating on me. And I want my own children to know, your body is private. It's sacred. No one should ever touch you here, and if somebody does, this is what you should do. And keeping an open conversation with them that I'm here and I'm not afraid to talk about these things. So come to me if you have questions. I think every talk that I have with my boys, and it was age appropriate as they've grown, every one of those talks, it brought us closer in some way. And with some of my boys, it just even more visibly closer. It's like I shared information with them that they wondered about. And now all of a sudden they're like, Dad must trust me because he's talking to me about this. And it brought us closer. But now I've given them tools that I never had. And I'm looking at my foster baby going, well, I've been through some things in my life too, son. And I'm going to be here, God willing, to walk you through some of those same questions that I would have had when I was young and nobody was giving to me. And if I can do nothing else but provide a safe environment for him, even through the trauma that he's going to go through, because trauma starts in the womb. And that's one thing you learn. Trauma actually starts in the womb. If they in the foster care system specifically, they're talking about if the parents are not healed from their own trauma or not addressing their own trauma, the effect on the baby, it doesn't have to be all drugs. It's not, I mean, we know that drugs affect babies in the womb, but it doesn't have to all be drugs. I mean, the body is releasing massive amounts of stress hormones in an individual going through trauma, and the baby is bathed in those hormones. And what they're finding out is that children who come from traumatic families, and they actually, even if they're removed from the parent at birth, later on in life, as they grow, they start developing symptoms as if they're in a safe situation now. They start developing symptoms of children who were actually alive, aware and birthed and everything and have grown up under trauma. These babies that were in the womb and removed at birth, when they start growing up in a safe home, they start exhibiting the same things and they never went through it. It's because trauma affects people in the womb as well. So if we can be a help to our foster son, soon to be adopted son, and we can be there for him and give him a chance at life and give him tools to deal with the trauma that he went through in the womb, then we will have done, we will have answered a calling upon our hearts.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
That's amazing.
We've covered so many amazing things, but if people want to see your blog or you read your poetry, where's a good place for them to go for that, Daniel?
It is These Ashes, www.theseashes@wordpress.com. I haven't done a whole lot of blogging there in the past several months. Usually, but there's a lot of stuff there if they want to get a frame of reference for my story or whatever, and my poetry is there. I have a raw writing style. That comes in waves as I'm processing things. I do a lot of writing now. This is kind of counterintuitive to me in some ways because the village I grew up in where most of the abuse happened, the individuals and whatever, I actually write on their Facebook page positive memories from my youth growing up there. And I've had such a huge outpouring of response and gratitude from people in that community that I'm taking them back to happier times. And I'm not talking about the trauma I experienced there. And that's been so healing for me. So that's been a lot of my writing has been focused of late, is just thinking about happier times in my childhood in the village where much of the damage was done to me. So
wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I think that's also an effective way of, addressing. We talked about this just recently, how gratitude is an antidote to regret. And I think that's a great way of,
true.
A lot of survivors have so much regret over their past, their history. But if you could look back and actually find things that you can be grateful for, to have gratitude for, and just do that daily, to find things. And it's a really good antidote to regret, I've found, at least for my life.
I feel like that's famous last words.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's good.
What were you going to say, Daniel?
No, I was just going to say it has changed my perspective when I drive through that village, which I do periodically. It has changed my perspective because for a while there, all I could think about was his house. And sometimes I would drive by his house because I'm processing what happened. And now I can go through the town and I'm like, oh, I remember this and this and this. And then I start developing stories and sharing them with the townspeople on their Facebook page. And it has been healing to me. So now I can drive through there and I don't feel all the loss. I feel, Kevin, gratitude for living in a time where life was simpler and there was a lot of joys of childhood and not for once in my life thinking about all the bad. There's enough gold there amidst all the ashes. There's good things to come out of that. So
that's beautiful.
Thank
you, Daniel. I love that.
Well, we always end in prayer. And Daniel, would you like to start us off?
Sure.
So that's it for today.
We are going to have a prayer time if you want to stick with us. If not, we believe in you.
We want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories.
If you like this podcast, please rate and review, because that's how other people can find us. And we really want to spread this message.
Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift. As we were just speaking of gratitude, thank you for being the Redeemer and the one who gives beauty for the ashes of our life. Thank you so much for supportive people. Thank you for our time together today. And most of all, I thank you for hope. Hope is what gets us through. Hope is what gives courage. And I see that so much in some of the stories that are coming out today, and even in the young man that we were talking about earlier in our conversation today. We want to thank you for working on behalf of survivors, for caring about our stories, and for giving us one another. Amen.
Father, I thank you for all your blessings. I just pray for your blessing in Daniel's life and his wife as they raise this young boy to be an amazing man. And I just pray for your blessing in their life, and that you would continue to bless his other children And just thank you for his work and the courage he has to raise another young child at his age, the grand age of 50. Lord, I just pray that we would continue to find things to be grateful for and to share those things, and that would bring hope to other survivors. And I pray for anyone listening that they would find hope and that you would give them that hope, Lord, that there is a better life and they do deserve to have hope. And Lord, I just thank you that we have friends and we have people that we can share our life story with, that community that we can grow alongside with and continue to share our stories with, and also have new stories to share. In your name I pray.
And Father, I pray that this might be an encouragement. Maybe somebody hasn't told their story yet. Maybe they don't know how they can help, but that whatever it is that we've gone through, that we can use it for good. It doesn't have to name us. It doesn't have to define us, that we can find hope. We've talked a lot about hope, and sometimes when we look at the stats, it's easy to be hopeless, but we know that you are a good God, and we know that when we all do our part in speaking up and doing what you nudge us to do for Daniel, blogging, and then now this baby, Lord, that we just listen to what you are calling us to do, and that we take that baby step. That one little thing can make such a huge difference. And I thank you for this platform that we can share and people can hear and maybe get some hope and some answers in your son's holy name. And we just pray for this blessing on Daniel and his wife and this sweet baby, Lord, that you will just walk with them as they walk through this. And as he said, there's going to be things, and it's parenting on steroids. And I pray that you'll just thank you for all the things he's learning, that he will be, the kind of dad that can listen and hear and believe. In your son's holy name, amen.
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 Amen.